Hello everybody, and please excuse me, I'm going to have to speak fully in English since I don't have a single word of French. I am so sorry. I always say that prostitution is the slyest form of sexual abuse that exists on the earth, and I say so because it is so very, very good at concealing itself. I'm going to read two short pieces of writing that I wrote recently about two different elements that I don't think we focus on enough when we talk about this issue. And one of them is culpability, and the other is consent. On culpability, the sexually abusive nature of prostitution has an additional element not commonly found across other forms of sexual abuse. Although many survivors of sexual abuse report experiencing strong feelings of guilt and shame, seldom are those feelings rooted in behaviours or material realities that would be received by society as concrete evidence of culpability on the part of the abused. In the sexual abuse of prostitution, the tolerance of unwanted sex for material gain is absolutely received as evidence of culpability, and women in prostitution are routinely shamed and shunned for it. Some sex trade survivor testimony, including my own, lays out a distinction between the forms of trauma experienced in prostitution as compared with socially understood forms of sexual abuse. And some contend that the psychic anguish of prostitution abuse is compounded many times by the sense of culpability contained within it. It is long past time that prostitution was recognised as the form of sexual abuse that it is, and included under the banner of the Me Too movement. The socially unrecognised truth is that prostitution is the commercialisation of sexual abuse. Prostituted sex is coerced by its nature. The cash is the coercive force. If we think about the scenario of a loaded gun pointed at somebody, we will have no problem identifying that gun as an instrument of coercion. Because of the capitalist structure of our world, which surrounds us with the reality of money in everything we see, do, and experience, we have a great deal more trouble identifying cash as a coercive force, but that is exactly what cash is. This is not an indictment of capitalism necessarily. There is a very great deal of difference between coercing someone to make a sandwich and coercing them to bend over and tolerate unwanted sex. Unwanted sex in every other conceivable scenario is identified as sexually abusive. It is only in prostitution that the abusive nature of the sex is denied, and it is denied because the coercion itself is not identified. Prostitution will never be recognised as sexual abuse until the cash transaction integral to it is identified as coercive by its nature. Further to this, we must look behind the cash at the willful intention of the person using it as a means of coercion, because coercion is a chain that starts with human intention. In prostitution, men are well aware that the sex involved is unwanted, that it must be coerced with cash before the woman will capitulate to it. The physical act of handing over cash is evidence in itself of the understanding that the sexual situation wouldn't otherwise happen. It is evidence of the intentional nature of the coercion. The coercion is designed to create capitulation. When we bring any form of force to bear in order to create sexual capitulation, that capitulation is not to be confused with sexual consent. The consent here is not to have sex, but to tolerate it. This reality removes prostituted sex from the realm of sex that could even be considered consensual, because coercion itself renders sexual consent impossible. Thank you all very much for coming here this evening. Thank you, Ashley, everybody, all of my colleagues and allies. I look forward to the rest of the night. Thank you.